Joining me now from Tucson, Arizona, Vice President of the National Border Patrol Council, Art Del Cueto. Art, so the message is if you happen to live in Guatemala or El Salvador or Honduras is, okay, we need to get to the border, possibly just get to Texas, right? And then we can violate the sovereignty of the United States, walk up to one of the Border Patrol agents and claim to be a refugee. You're processed. Right. You're put in on a bus, which is taken to the airport. You're put on an airplane, and you're flown to California. So you get a free airfare to San Diego. Hey, what a deal.
You know, it sounds horrible, but I was just talking to a couple of agents just a couple of days ago, and they said that their morale is kind of low right now because it almost feels like they're the ones that are working with the cartels themselves because we're facilitating their travel further into the U.S.
Right.
One thing I want to point out is you're right when it comes to all these Central Americans that are just coming across, turning themselves in and claiming asylum. But what people need to understand is it's not just Central Americans. We're seeing large numbers of people from Cuba now that are doing the same thing. The message is out to a lot of countries: just come to the border, jump, turn yourselves in, come wherever, any means you can do is just get inside, reach a Border Patrol agent, and just turn yourself in and say, hey, you know what, I'm claiming asylum. And one of the things that you mentioned, and I thank you for mentioning that people are not paying attention to, is while agents are being removed from these tasks of defending our nation's borders for duties with these illegal aliens that are turning themselves in, we have no clue what is coming in behind us because obviously our resources are tied up with the mass flow at the detention facilities.
It's the perfect storm. I want to talk about these Cubans in just a second, but first I want to go back to this issue about the drug cartels. And this goes to some of the checkpoints. You know, it used to be the Border Patrol would man or woman checkpoints in Arizona and in New Mexico, California, what have you, and Texas. But from what I'm hearing, Art, these checkpoints, for example, in New Mexico are not being manned anymore. And that's, again, another green light for the cartels, is it not?
No, it definitely is. One particular thing that's different that we're seeing here in the Tucson sector, and that speaking to Hector Garza down in Laredo, the president down there, he's also seen the same things. Our two sectors, we are not experiencing 8 people that are just crossing and then turning themselves in. In these two areas, we're still having to do the old-fashioned Border Patrol work where you have to chase the people, go after them, track them in order to apprehend them. And then when we apprehend them, they're still wanting to fight. But that is a big red flag that people aren't paying enough attention to. These things are very much a very welcome sight for the drug cartels that are bringing drugs into our countries and flooding our city streets.
Now, real quick, the Cubans that you're encountering along the border now, you say the word is out, but the Cubans have a similar protected special status as the El Salvadorians, the Guatemalans, and Hondurans, correct?
Correct. They're coming across the border, and many of them, I asked them myself, why is it that you did not do it the way I've seen in the past where they get a raft and come into Florida? And they said, well, the one dry foot, one wet foot rule is no longer in existence. What we are doing is we are flying from Cuba to Panama. Panama's not asking us for visas. We fly into Panama, and then we get a bus all the way through Central America to the southern border with Mexico. We speak to Mexican authorities, and this is what these Cubans told me. This is not something I'm making up.
Right.
The Cuban people that I spoke to said, we speak to the Mexican government, and they say, as long as you're not staying here and your intentions are to travel through our country and end up in the United States, we allow you to do so.
You see, Mexico is not being a good neighbor. Let's face it, Mexico hasn't been a good neighbor to the United States for many, many decades. They could be patrolling, they could be protecting their northern border, but they're not. And then we also know that Mexico has some of the toughest immigration laws in the world. But instead, the story you just told me tells us that they're not willing to enforce those immigration laws. It's unfortunate. But I want to go to, Art, the time and the money and the resources that's now being poured into the Border Patrol to play nursemaid, as I call it, or possibly tour guide now, since we're putting them on buses and we're putting them on planes. This is a crazy amount of time, money, and resources that's being used to move people around who shouldn't be in this country in the first place.
And it's not just in areas that you hear on the news where people are turning themselves in. If you take, for instance, the Tucson sector, we are having agents travel to places of Texas to to get some of the individuals that they've arrested and transport them to Tucson so we can do the processing here, as well as towards Yuma and do processing here. Some areas are better equipped than others. I had just spoken to an agent in the Yuma sector. He said at his facility, they're equipped to have 250 people detained there. He was telling me they have over 1,000 in that area. And that's the reality. And the problem is these individuals are being released within the United States, and they will not show up to their immigration court. We will have the same problems continuously 10, 15 years from now with people that are undocumented in this country.
It's unfortunate, but the system is completely overwhelmed. 500,000 apprehensions that we know of so far in the fiscal year, or possibly the calendar year of 2019. I'm not sure. It doesn't matter. We're talking hundreds of thousands. We're talking 100,000 apprehended in March, 100,000 apprehended in April. No country, no civilized nation can continue like this, because this is an attack on our civil society. It's time that Congress gets its act in gear. And the only way Congress gets its act in gear, Art, is if the people put pressure on them.
Definitely. Congress needs to do their job. The immigration judges need to be sent down to the southern border. The amnesty officers need to stop being afraid to tell these people, your amnesty claim does not work. It's an invasion of our southern border. It's an invasion of our country. It has nothing to do with anyone's race.
No.
It has nothing to do with that. It's an invasion, and we need to start taking care of our country, because right now, I can tell you, and it sounds horrible, we have lost control of our southern border.
It's unfortunate. I believe you, though. And the unfortunate part is these people are being bussed all over the country now, and they're being released into our neighborhoods. Art, thank you.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One American News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One American News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.